So, a little bit about Peter. I've known Peter for about 8, 9 years now, and I'm very happy to have him on this call because he's going to talk a little bit about the data fabric story. And, you know, the data fabric story is something that Netapp really created, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it as basically this is the story that's important for everyone to understand. Strip out the Netapp, strip out the Cisco, strip out everything else. It's a story here that's really important, and how the problems and issues of today in the cloud and tomorrow in the cloud really present themselves. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Peter. And Peter, take it away. I look forward to this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Walt. So since we're talking about birthdays, I will share that last month was Netapp's 25th birthday. So we have been focused so heavily on bringing data management and solutions to customers that it has just been such a natural transition to go just from data itself to data in the cloud. And that's what we're going to look at over the next few minutes. What does this really mean, and how do you capture where that data is, but more importantly, how do you manage all of that? So as we're looking, let me just grab my, for some reason it didn't want to move the slide. We'll try that once again. There we go. So as we're talking about where things are at in the cloud, I love what Enterprise Strategy Group shares. That's one of the leading analytic companies here in the US. And they release a report every quarter. And they've shown now for 9 quarters in a row the leading reason that a customer, perhaps just like yourself, is looking at going to the cloud is how can I actually manage my disaster recovery, backups, and archival space. It's really bringing where that customer's comfort level is, because a lot of times a customer says, you know, it's great that I could test some things out in the cloud, and we see that as number 2, 41% there. But for a lot of customers, it's, I am dealing with a lot of data. That data is at aegis. I may not want to just keep it on-prem. Is there a way that I can reduce its footprint, perhaps even reduce its cost, and start understanding more of what the cloud can bring to the table for me? And that's what we're going to cover, 3 different solutions this morning that I believe are really going to help you, because we have seen literally thousands of customers already adapt this. I'm going to share a few of the customers with you of what transformation this has meant for them. As we look at that, as Walt shared, the company, meaning Netapp, has really focused on data fabric, and that's for 2.5 years now. Data fabric, it's not a product. It's not something that cStor is going to say, here's the SKU number and this is what it's going to do for you. Instead, data fabric is all about a solution. It's where you are today. If I look here on the right-hand side, that would be the private cloud. That's your on-prem location today. And how do I take elements of my data today, elements perhaps also of that compute resource that I've invested in, and how do I move those up the cloud stack, perhaps to a hybrid arena or even into the public cloud, and how do I really leverage the value of that? So Netapp said, rather than just having products that are sold, and I love what cStor has done, they've done the same thing of crafting and creating solutions for you. And it really means, first of all, how am I going to replicate that data? So rather than you as a customer trying to navigate this whole cloud arena on your own, that's where cStor steps up and says, let's talk about the different options that you have. What type of application or applications are you going to be focused on? And now, how do I replicate it to the appropriate cloud? And then second, how do I ensure that I have that security there? Are you going to encrypt the data before it's sent to the cloud? Are you going to encrypt it after? Or perhaps the type of data you're working with, maybe it's more focused on that test and development type. I really may not need to encrypt. Maybe it's more of a generic flavor, and it's just all about speed and feed. How fast can I get it there? What can I test? And now how can I move forward? And the biggest value that I have seen that has really resonated with customers is how can I have a single pane of glass that allows me to see all the data that I have already deployed on-prem, whether you're using Netapp or some third-party solution. And also as I embrace going forward in that cloud direction of the hybrid and the public. And that's one of the things that Netapp has really focused on over the last 18, 19 months. We call it data management. How can I manage all this data in that single pane of glass? So I'm going to show you with the 3 different solutions this morning how that can be done. So as we start off, we saw there that the Enterprise Storage Group said that the #1 reason that a customer starts looking at the cloud, they want to keep it simple, something that they can manage, and if they do things incorrectly, they don't want any outage in their production. So that's why a lot of customers start off with archival. And I love what cStor brings to the table there of making sure that it's not a trial and error approach, but it's a proven approach that they're going to guide you through. And so that's where Netapp has stepped up over 3 years ago with a solution called AltaVault. AltaVault allows you today to work with what you're already using for your backup and recovery mechanisms. In fact, AltaVault plugs in probably with 95% of the solutions that are on the market here in the US. So it's basically, rather than change the way you're doing things today, let's augment that by, rather than keeping the data on-prem or sending it off to tape, let's put an AltaVault appliance there that allows me to reduce its footprint tremendously. Typically, we're seeing a 30-to-1 space savings ratio. And then it also allows that data to be encrypted and sent off into another location. So one of the things we just released last month by incorporating AltaVault, and for many customers like yourself that already are enjoying benefits of our core operating system called ONTAP, we came up with this solution called File Services Cloud Backup. And what it really means, whether I take our physical storage or virtual, I plug that in with a cataloging system called Snap Center, and then you send that off to our physical or virtual AltaVault, and it allows you then to replace what you have for tape, and rather than keeping that storage local, it's going to send that off to an S3 target over an S3 protocol. So today we support well over 29 different targets, allowing you to leverage what you want in the public cloud. And if perhaps you're saying maybe that public cloud is not the right arena for me today, we also can keep that data in a hybrid cloud or put it in another form factor still on your private cloud, but also reducing the footprint tremendously, so you're saving the cost of that storage. Let's build the slide here so you can actually see the value that it brings. So one of the things that I hear so many times when customers are using tape, how do I very rapidly pull what I need? So AltaVault says, I'm going to keep metadata pointers of every file that comes in. And so when you as the customer simply say, I want to recover this file or several files, it knows exactly what pointers to go and retrieve, and we then bring to the table that single file recovery very rapidly. If you're familiar with ONTAP, you know that we allow you to keep backups at a volume level. And we do hundreds of those today at a volume level. AltaVault changes that from just hundreds to literally thousands per volume. In fact, it's 3,600 backup recovery points that I can keep per volume. So I could do one per day if I so desired, one backup every day of my critical application, and there's 10 years of recovery. Or I could change that one a day or two a day, and then roll that into, after perhaps 1 year, switch it to one backup every 7 days. And now all of a sudden I've moved it from 10 years to 70 years. So it allows you then to leverage what do you really need for that long-term archival. And the biggest value is as you send that data off, because it's been converted to objects, number one, we can reduce the footprint a lot more efficiently than keeping it as a file. But more importantly, it is encrypted with all of your data. So you maintain the encryption keys, and more importantly, then we see customers simply saying this is really a drop in place and it's up and going. A lot of times when I've been asked to work with customers like yourself, and they say, well, how complicated is this? Well, I can take a virtual AltaVault today and deploy that, whether it's on VMware, Hyper-V, KVM, and have that up and going and fully configured, typically in 7 to 8 minutes. It's that simple. And so that's really the message that cStor has, is that as you're moving into the cloud, this is a great way to begin that journey of looking at archiving that data. One of the examples that I see as we move forward, and just waiting for my slides here to catch up for some reason as I'm moving, clicking, there we go. It was pausing for some reason there. Oh, it jumped ahead really far. Oh, we'll just backtrack that slightly. There we go. So just 2 weeks ago, we had one of our big wins for AltaVault. And in fact, when I say big wins, we've seen just this year alone in the last 3 months, January, February, March, well over 720 customers gravitate to AltaVault from what they were already using for their archival solution, for the simple reason it is that simple to deploy. And so as you take a quick moment to scan through this success story, you see that they were already using a third-party backup mechanism. Sometimes they can continue doing that. A lot of times we see customers simply saying, I don't even need to use all the bells and whistles. I can save myself some money from doing all of that, and now I can just add AltaVault, reduce that storage footprint, and move forward. And that's the biggest message that we're hearing again and again, that typically we're seeing anywhere from 40 to 55% savings in the first year alone, just in the storage footprint of what the customer was already doing with tape, and moving that into the footprint of AltaVault. And especially if you happen to be using ones like Amazon Web Service or Microsoft Azure, both of those are really competitive when it comes to the pricing structure for the long-term archival of storage. And so they keep on, rather than increasing costs, and that's almost the mindset of a lot of customers, how much more is this going to cost? In fact, some of you may already be aware that Amazon has something called Glacier, and Glacier allows me to store that at 0.007 cents per gig. That is just dirt cheap. And so it means that your data is safeguarded, it's encrypted, the footprint is reduced, and anytime I want things to be recovered back, that unlike that recall of tapes and needing to request the tape and recataloging it and putting it into the catalog system, AltaVault simply is the same mechanism you use to back it up, is the same tool that you're going to use to move forward. So that's one of our solutions. It's a great way to begin as a customer. And then we see, remember the bar that I gave you at starting off, I said the #1 reason customers look at the cloud is for that backup and archival. Well, that addressed there with AltaVault. And then we saw the #2, 42% using it for the test and dev. And this is really where ONTAP Cloud comes in. So this is our virtual software that runs in either Amazon or Azure, and it allows a customer, as you can see here, the plethora of options to spin up readily some value adds. So let me give you an example. I have Adobe, that maybe you were using Photoshop or Adobe or PDF Viewer, all from Adobe, and Adobe says, rather than investing in a lot of servers, we need to do a lot of testing, but the testing mechanism is based on how our customers are actually using our PDF Viewer, our Composer, our photo ingester. So what they actually are using is our ONTAP Cloud, and so typically they spin up literally hundreds of these every week. And the nice thing with ONTAP Cloud is that it's a virtual layer between the physical storage in either AWS or Azure and the VMs, the virtual machines that you run. So it allows a customer to choose the protocol or protocols that they want. It allows them to really fast take those snapshots. And that's the biggest value that we have right here with ONTAP Cloud. So that when a customer says, I really want to do some very quick test and dev in a cloud platform like AWS or Azure, rather than using some third-party mechanism that may take many, many minutes and cost a lot, we bundle all this into the same solution with ONTAP Cloud, and we simply say, wouldn't it be nice to simply schedule when do I want that backup to occur, or whenever it's on the call, when you want to, take the backup. And a typical backup, we call it near instantaneous, meaning it's going to take typically 2 to 3 seconds. Point, click, done, and no disruption to the application. Yes, it did take 2 or 3 seconds, but the application didn't have to go offline. So it really means that your test and dev really allows it to move forward a lot faster. And now that I've made my backups, I can do my recovery just the same way. Or now that I have a backup, wouldn't it be nice for your engineering team, just like Adobe does, to dole out multiple copies of that same point of time backup? So I could schedule, take a backup at 7 o'clock this morning, and then at 7:50 before my engineers come into work, maybe I need 50 copies of those for each one of my engineers to have their own little sandbox to play. So our tool says, how many copies do you want? What time would you like it? And what time would you like that to be blown away? All automated. It really means then that a customer can leverage the value of the cloud, that portability, that almost instant on feeling, and also leverage the features that they really want for that test and dev. As we look at this moving forward, one of the other things that we see, oh, sorry, I clicked and I clicked a second time because the slides didn't quite move as fast as I thought. It allows you to select how you want this to perform. So perhaps you're going to use this as a disaster recovery solution that we see for a lot of customers so that they keep that in sync between on-prem and going into either AWS or Azure. So if I use the entry level that we have down here, giving me 4,000 IOPS, so it's still very nice performance. With that, we see the price tag is 2 cents per hour. That is dirt cheap when you think of it. So 48 cents a day, and I have our ONTAP cloud running, that you have all these bells and whistles. That is an amazing value story for a customer to say, I didn't realize I could actually have so many things without paying so much. And then if you go, needless to say, up the entire stack, the price does increase. But the nice thing is I can adjust dynamically. Maybe I don't need 32,000 IOPS on a virtual VM continually. So wouldn't it be nice to say maybe in the daytime have that high and then at nighttime lower it so you're not paying as much, and it dynamically allows you to change what you need. And the last thing I want to say about our ONTAP cloud is that a lot of times people pay more than what they need. So take a quick look at look with me here that I see our solid state that's offered with AWS, and we see here that's for general purpose, good performance. And a lot of people have this mindset that if I'm using solid state in the public cloud, it's going to be exactly the same as perhaps what you've been working with on cStor, putting solid state on-prem. The two are so different. So in the cloud, we actually see that you will get better performance, higher throughput, if you switch it to hard disk drives than solid state. So I put the slide there just as a level set that do not expect the same configuration that what you're doing on-prem. On-prem, we really are gravitating to solid state because it gives you phenomenal performance at a reduced cost. In the cloud, we do solid state, but it's for a balance of performance and the transactional reads and writes. And because of the way that ONTAP Cloud is functioning, you will actually see much better performance as you move there with your hard disk drives. So that was number 2. So we bring it from the archival level. We have some amazing customers there that are using that. In fact, several of our universities here in Greater Arizona actually are testing with AltaVault because it's a great way to take that archival data and leverage the cloud, but at a reduced cost. And then we just talked about our ONTAP cloud. I referenced Adobe as one example. And again, we can see so many customers that this is a natural fit because customers say, I want to do the test and dev. I may not have that equipment on-prem. And this is a great use case to say, I can spin it up in a matter of minutes. Now that I have it up and going, I keep it as long as I want. I replicate the data back when I'm ready to turn it off, and turn it off, and I'm done with the price. And then the final one that we're seeing a lot of customers looking towards Microsoft, that they were running Exchange on-prem, and they're saying, Microsoft, you have a really good solution with Office 365, but there are a few things that you didn't fill the gaps, nor do you have planned to fill the gaps. Things like, how am I backing up my Exchange, SharePoint, the OneDrive for Business? What am I going to be doing for recovering that data? How simple is it? And if I do recover it, will the data go right back so that it's not disruptive to my end user? Or do I have to tell that user, not only did the data recover, but it's going to take several minutes to hours, but it's going to go into a separate bucket that you, Mr. End User, have to go and recover from that bucket. So our value statement is, how can we actually make this easier for you? And the other thing we find when we talk about Office 365, it's all dependent upon your administrator. What did they put for rules and filters? Because if they're already filtering out the spam and already filtering out certain messages because they think that that's not appropriate, those are gone. And what happens if they made a mistake and filtered incorrectly and you need that back? So Netapp stepped up and said, what about if we bring this simplicity message, just the same way that we talked about Altavault? Drop the appliance in and it works. A great use case for a customer to back up and do away with some of their tape. A great use case for ONTAP Cloud for that test and dev, or even for some DR. And now with Office 365, wouldn't it be nice to have all the data and I can still filter through what I need, how I need it, and if I make a mistake, I still have all the data and I can bring it back, and we're going to keep all the data for life at a really low cost. And the way we do it is we do a simple plug into Office 365, encrypting that connection to the customer, and we keep that storage in the public cloud, or the customer can choose to replicate that to their own device if they so desire, to even lower the cost more, and then switch it also to objects. Just as we do with Altavault, anytime I can switch a file to an object, I can always reduce its footprint even more, meaning I'm going to save space, which means to you, it's going to save on the cost. So the way it really looks for you, if you were looking at Office 365, you pay Microsoft the services that you want from them, assuming you wanted the full coverage of your Exchange, your SharePoint, which is also your SQL, and your OneDrive for Business. For customers that are between 500 to 5,000, you're basically looking at $35 per user per year. And again, if you increase the commitment to cStor as they sell you the license, all of a sudden you get additional savings. And if you had more users, you also get more. If you aren't an enterprise commercial type, that's the most expensive. There's multiple flavors of how we categorize customers. We put them in one of 5 buckets. So I chose the most expensive model just to show you at the most you would be paying is $35 annually per user. If you wanted to bring your own storage, meaning cStor is going to say, why don't you put that on our storage in another location? You pay the low cost of just $19 per year. Again, that would be without any discounts. So all of a sudden it really brings to the table an amazing value story that all my Exchange, all my SharePoint, all of my OneDrive for Business data is there, and now I can say to that end user, what version did you actually want of your OneDrive for Business file? Rather than just the last time that you saved it, it's every version of every file that you had. I can go back and recover all through a single pane of glass and point click, and then it sends that right back to where the end user actually had deleted it. So the experience for the end user is really clean and crisp. So as we pull this all together, we've talked really at a high level 3 different value stories. And with the cloud control, which is the integration that we call for Office 365, that we just released that as a beta product last month. It will be going as a GA, in fact, 2 weeks from tomorrow. So we're looking at May the 18th. And cStor can sign you up if you want as a beta, reduced cost, or if you want to kick the tires between now and then and going live on May the 18th. But even as beta customers, we already have several hundred customers here in the US, as well as worldwide, that are kicking the tires of this and saying, this is really changed the way that I've been working. So whether it was government customers, we have a number of universities that said, this is perfect for our staff. That where Microsoft has an amazing solution for the production, but as data ages or sometimes accidentally is deleted or purged, this is a solution that, although Office 365 still sees it as purged, this is a way of bringing it back exactly the way it looked at any point, because all your data is exactly kept for life. So the moment that you turn this on, at that point, that's when the archival begins. Guys, thank you so much for the time just to share some of these stories, a few things on customers and the use cases. Kim, I'm going to turn it back to you for some Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Peter. Great session. Very timely, of course. At this time, we will open it up for questions. As a reminder, if you have questions, please post them to the questions pane. And we do have a few for you, Peter. Question 1, there are many choices for archival. What makes Altavault different?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say there's 2 things that really has made the difference. And again, just saying that 720 plus customers just in the 3 months. One is the cost. the cost of our solution typically is 65% less than our competitors. And number two, it's one thing to put a solution in place, but how am I keeping the data? And what AltaVault does is, again, reducing that footprint, typically 30 to 1. That's what really saves. So it's a saving not only of the cost to deploy the solution, but also for that long-term archival, multiple years, my data footprint is tremendously reduced.
Excellent, thank you. We'll squeeze a couple more questions in that are coming in. Next question. Is there a demo period that I can use cloud control with my own data? It sounds simple, but I'd like to see it in action.
That is awesome. So in fact, one of the things I forgot to say, whether you were looking at AltaVault or the ONTAP cloud or the cloud control, all three of those, we have a 30-day entirely free demo. So please just work through cStor. They will sign you up for the demo, and that you can kick the tires, see for yourself, and you have 30 days at no cost to you to actually see how this solution works.
Excellent. We'll get one more question in. What happens when Netapp changes the version of ONTAP? Can I upgrade the version I use in the public cloud?
So with our ONTAP cloud, when you sign that out with either AWS or Azure, it's one of two versions. We do both the current version that we have of our operating system, and we do one previous version. The moment you reserve a virtual machine through either of those two public cloud providers, that version stays locked at that, so that Amazon or Azure will not change the version on you. But if you want to change the version, we give you a simple 4-step process. It's basically point, update, wait, and refresh. And it allows you to always enjoy the most current version. So you can manually have it upgrade, otherwise it stays at that version for one reason, so it's not going to be disruptive to you.
Excellent, thank you. That actually concludes our questions for today. Thank you again to Peter for some excellent expert information on journey